and add myself. Give me 1 second. It is telling me that my camera is off right now. There we go. All right. Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. Happy Saturday. We are live on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all of the fun streaming services. I had quite a lot that I've missed out on. I'm trying to be very careful on certain platforms with what I discuss. I'm looking at some of you guys' comments. There's been a lot happening in media. I know everybody's waiting for the great reveal leading up to the Super Bowl. They want to know what's going on. What should we anticipate for 2026 and the year of the horse? There's so much that is going on in the world that I want to, before I start, remind everyone to take deep breaths every day. Like whenever you can and you feel out of sync, like you're falling into the hypnosis of scrolling, when you're just trying to figure out what's going on and what to do next, remember to lean into your breath because it is the very thing keeping you alive right now and floating through what we refer to as the simulation. I think that's really important to keep in mind. Someone must have been in tune with me because they asked me to talk about Ifa today, which I don't feel qualified to talk about fully. But I will tell you what I've researched about it and how it predates artificial intelligence and tech. And a huge part of why I believe Nigeria has been on the forefront of all conversations cycling around the news, the media, and shows. I actually started watching Sinners again today. And I had like a really important question while I was watching it. There is a scene, hey, there was a really important scene. And I say the important scene because it's actually a sex scene, but it's when Annie and Stack meet, or when they meet again, and she speaks to him in Yoruba, and I was like, why? That's interesting because I remember Michael B. Jordan coming out in this interview talking about how he was named by Babalao, and then we have all of this news back to back to back about Nigeria. Anthony Joshua, Nicki Minaj coming out talking about genocide going on over there right now, things happening with BRICS currency. There's so many different things happening. And when I thought about that, I said, well, what is it? Now, I participated in a panel a couple of months ago, about a month ago. If I am breaking up, guys, you might want to join the stream on TikTok. I see it's lagging a little bit on my end here. It's also on YouTube and Instagram. Hold on, guys. Some people are saying it's muted. 1 second. Let me test my audio. 1 second, guys. 1 second. I think we might do without my microphone this morning. I think I'll be okay without it. Hold on. Can everybody on YouTube hear me? We'll say, I'll ask if you can hear me on YouTube because I see my sounds coming through on here. Okay, can everybody on TikTok hear? Still can't hear. Okay, hold on. Okay, give me a second. All of a sudden, TikTok Live is spazzing. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to use my laptop microphone. Seems to be a little bit easier. Oh, we're already live. We're not live on the backup, or we are live on YouTube and Instagram, though. Okay, great. Making sure the sound is good for everybody before we get started. Of course, we get off on a glitchy note. That's okay. That's well expected. They said, "Cut it off." I'm just kidding. There's no they. I don't think that there's a big man in power sitting behind a screen stopping every time that I start talking. Guys, I'm not sure what the issue is. Okay, I'll meet you guys at YouTube and Instagram. I'll end it on here and start over. Not for YouTube, guys. I'm so sorry for the glitching. Give us a second. Okay. Hi, everyone on YouTube. I'm going to try to play around with the glitching a little bit on TikTok, but I'm still going to be speaking on here. Someone started off in TikTok asking me about. Okay, great. Somebody started off asking me if I could talk about IFA, and I said that I do not feel well qualified to guide people through IFA. However, I think it is important that we start learning about these things, especially in relation to artificial intelligence. Let me try to put it back on here. Can we hear me now? Are we good? Somebody on TikTok say something so I know if we can hear now or not, because the volume is still not reading to me correctly. So, okay, great. I might have to just use my phone because it's this desktop version of it that's acting weird as well. So, when I think about IFA specifically, I think about the divination system of beginnings and endings. And the whole world operates on cycles. Specifically, when we're talking about the number 256, we are talking about open and closed systems. So the universe always responds in terms of yes and no's, in terms of I or O, which is really just like binary code, and also mark or no mark. So, when you think about Africa and its origin specifically, when it comes to all the minerals that are used and mined for, specifically for our smartphones, for electric things that we use, like Tesla vehicles, even your modern day TVs. Here, guys, give me a second. We're gonna start this. I don't like starting off on a weird note. Let me get my phone and we're gonna start again. We're still going on YouTube though. I don't let things like this get me down. It's just kind of aggravating as someone who's gotten my account taken several times before. Well, actually one time, but I'm on like an account warning right now. It is a little disheartening that I have to like fight to do this, and I'm not the person who's going to like single-handedly like point a finger and say, "Yep, it's so and so behind it." But I have found that speaking a certain frequency of truth at times, even before I say anything, has me up like a red flag. So I'm sure I'm a red flag on somebody's list somewhere. I don't deny that, but I also don't let that be the basis of what I'm talking about and why. So let us, okay. I'm just using my phone. I'm going to use my phone because it's easy. And anyway, um, I thought about these movies and these films and the encapsulation of stories, specifically how our stories are generated into the earth. They're generated into the ocean. They're generated into the way that we are perceiving stories. If we think about the way that technology is built and what it is using as a form of being able to contribute to how stories are written, how cameras are made, how film is executed, and how these stories inherently become a part of our memory and what we're doing. So, and hi everybody, back on TikTok again. I'm on YouTube. If you would like that format better, you can head over to my YouTube or to Instagram because we're going there. Had a lot of glitchy moments, but I figure if I do it solely for my iPhone, it'll be better. Um, so, I study stories for a living. I look at pop culture, I look at things that are happening in the news, in the media, and I try to have my best to have a very balanced perspective on what I'm looking at. Because if I approached everything with a lot of emotional output, then I would never be able to properly convey teachings to you about the world. And so I never really liked calling myself an oracle per se, even though over time I did. I accepted that that was my role because growing up in Western civilization, especially from a Christian ideology, especially from a Christian ideology background, I was not told like this is a gift to be able to see and to perceive or to be able to see beyond what most people can. I did not learn that that was a gift at all. In fact, I probably got shunned for it more than it was celebrated. And being a grown woman and an adult, in this world now, in a place where cyberbullying on social media and people who have very low ranges of consciousness or even bots that are automated to send out like negative energy into people's lives, it's a weird universe to live in right now. And so if you are someone who has this gift, one thing I will say is there's no instant gratification that comes with being an oracle. There's no trophy that you get, there's no praise. It's not like being a pop star or a superstar. It's about understanding that the light that you carry is the stories of the world. And so being able to transmit that light is the same way that you're looking at your phone and you're looking at entertainment, waiting for a story to be transmitted into you and into your experience. Hi, everybody on YouTube who's coming in from TikTok. I appreciate it. We don't know what's going on, but we're going to keep going anyway. So when I was watching Sinners, I tried to watch it again from a technical perspective and not just from an emotional perspective because it's an emotional movie. And I pay attention to the fine details, not the ones necessarily that are focused on by like cinemaphiles or people who like looking into the heavy background or the history necessarily of the story. But I asked myself why. And so I mentioned someone at the beginning of the live was saying that asked if I looked into Sinners, and I said, "Yeah, I actually was just watching it, or not Sinners, but Ifa." And there is a scene at the beginning where they show the character Annie, played by Wumi Masaku, and she's speaking in Yoruba. And I was like, okay, that's interesting because Louisiana does adapt a lot of West African practices and culture into the state because of the diaspora. But also, Michael B. Jordan later on in interviews spoke about being named Babalawo, and I thought that was really interesting because we're talking about these open and closed systems. It's also in occult circles, in the way that we are watching television and the stories of our lives being not only a form of entertainment, but the ability to interpret like what's actually going on in our reality. Now, I remember when that film came out, there were a lot of things that were going on. I believe the Pope had died at age 88, right around the same weekend that they released that, which, of course, a lot of people can't make like a firm connection between why that was weird. But if you consider the Vatican, if you consider the connection between city states and countries to this spiritual authority that governs over continents, and you look at the story of the Americas, specifically of the South. I believe they say the movie took place in Clarksdale, Mississippi, but it was shot in Louisiana. And you look at the combination of all these different cultures and the story that they're telling, you're looking at it through your phone, first of all. So that should be like the first thing because the silver screen can be a little bit deceptive. It'll tell you stories very directly, pull on your heartstrings, but then there'll be like a public arena of things happening at the same time, which disclosure is available as you watch this movie and you understand like what vampires are or what one version of vampires are, what the story of Marxism is within, this vampire world that we've been given by Ryan Coogler. But I pay attention to like the line of projects and what story it's telling. So recently, in the news, because you guys know I kind of bridge together pop culture and entertainment with the Matrix to let you know like what is being told, at least what I can see through my eyes. And so I saw that Timothy Chalamet recently beat out Michael B. Jordan for Sinners. To me, and I'm just going to give you my honest opinion, it looks a little bit scripted. And scripted because there's never been a news story where one particular kind of person did not beat another person out for authority or a role. And so the same way in Sinners, at the very beginning when Smoke and Stack go and they open up the juke joint, they're told, oh, the Klan doesn't exist anymore, but they very much do. I really wonder when looking at the divination systems of Ifa and looking at the way that artificial intelligence is and our perception of reality and entertainment, are we able to tell the difference between watching a star lose an award or acceptance on the world stage versus watching the same thing happen in a movie? And can we understand how that relates back to us? Because it's one big circle. And a lot of people who tend to feel disconnected will come on and tell you, oh, that's not connected. You're reaching, it's not making sense. So let's put it this way, right? The Vatican is the spiritual holy water. It's not actually the holy water, but it has positioned itself as the holy water. The same weekend that they have a movie about twin energies splitting, being attacked or replaced with vampires, is the same weekend that the spiritual authority happens to switch positions, and then in comes a new pope who happens to have a southern bloodline. And I looked at that, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And people were going back and forth, like, oh, he's my cousin, he's Haitian, he's this, he's that. And I said, but it's telling a greater storyline, because even if we look at the origins of Louisiana, of a lot of southern states, they connect back to France, back to Italy. And we're talking about in terms of ownership and property. If you remember the character Remick as well, he was an Irish vampire, which I think I did a whole decode on that. It was the same weekend. He was an Irish vampire, and most people are not well aware, unless they're already well versed in the occult, that Irish Freemasonry, or one of the oldest lodges of Freemasonry, is in Ireland. And so it had me thinking about the knowledge, not just of divination systems, but of soul encapsulation, and how when we see these stories in these movies, they feel familiar to us. They feel and touch us on an emotional level, and yet we don't understand when our own story is played back to us. Anybody can go in and purchase a movie ticket, can scream and, chant and yell for representation, but do we realize what story is being played back to us? What is the story? The separation and the loss. One soul living, the other one dying, one seeking immortality. I said one of the oldest Freemason lodges is in Ireland. And this is a searchable fact. One of the oldest. But when I looked at the story, and I looked at it from a flat perspective, because this is a multi-dimensional world that we live in. So it's not just, how people complain or they argue about flat earth. I don't mean from a flat perspective. I mean from a multi-point perspective. What are we actually seeing? We're talking about data being information and stories. The scene where Sammy is singing and playing the guitar, first of all, his name is Sammy, like Samael or Samuel. And he goes to the crossroads, very much like the story of Robert Johnson, or maybe Robert or John Hooker, same energy, same kind of ciphered stories, to use your voice as a point of transition to the other side. The other side are monetary systems, they're contracts. They're about being able to understand what is our position in the films that we're looking at, the shows, the pop culture moments, and the celebrities, what's being told. What is the greatest form of currency right now? Perception, awareness. Someone said, I'm not excited about being incarnated in Dublin City for grid work, or Center for Grid Work. Once you find your position in what you're doing, I think that you change your mindset about what it feels like to be in your current state. When you're doing your soul's work, when you're doing what you were intended to do in this life, you become in alignment with where you are. And that's if you're in the spot that you're permanently supposed to be in, because many souls travel and incarnate in different places as well. But anyway, going back into the process of Ifa and centers, I was thinking about why artificial intelligence systems need Africa most. Why do they need them so much? And if not just for the minerals, for the ancestral blood ties that were a part of this story that have since separated through the diaspora. Um, People are not necessarily always aware of the minerals that they live on top of, much less how these minerals are a part of the human body and the spirit. And so when they become a part of the earth, it's kind of like emerging. You know how you've seen all these superhero movies about radiation and superpowers and where they come from? It also comes from these ancestral ties to the earth. Thank you. So data and stories are told to us every day through these mini moments that happen in pop culture, through these mini moments that happen in TV. And maybe this is just like my position as an oracle, but it gets really hard for me to take too much of it seriously without like zooming out and looking at the entire story. So when I saw the thing with like Marty Supreme winning over Sinners, or at least Timothy Chalamet's role in it winning over Sinners, I look at the individual roles that both of them play. Michael B. Jordan is famous for a few films like Creed or Fruitvale Station, which tend to tell the same story, or even Black Panther. There's always the unaliving of one brother, or one brother falling so another one rises. It's always this sense of alchemy through the story that's being told. And so when you see like a major celebrity invoking the same thing, that is a power. It's a divinatory power, in my opinion, being able to perceive yourself on the world stage in a position of the same stories being told everywhere. I am not sure who his Orisha is. I am not sure. I just know that he was named by a Babalawo. It's in a public interview that he said, but he never went into it. See, and when it comes to they target them, I think that everybody gets real excited feeling like there's a bunch of people in a room specifically looking for like certain bloodlines, like, yeah, I'm going to target you. When you become aware of who you are, that is your power. So I stray away from using terms like target all of the time, because when you know your power, you're not necessarily worried all the time about the other side. Instead, you are using and executing your power, because I've seen my story mirrored in many other movies and shows. I even saw a recent Netflix commercial with Tiana Taylor acting as an oracle. And I just laughed out loud, because it's like they know we can see them and they can see us. And by they, I mean anyone who willingly participates to embody an archetype or a caste system that they weren't necessarily born into. And do I think it's like malicious? Not necessarily, not in the way like I'm going to do something mean to this other person. It's more so I'm going to take advantage of the position that I have to embody this frequency that people are attracted to. And I saw the whole Netflix commercial, like this girl goes to her and she's sitting as a fortune teller and dragging her through all these different Netflix shows and scenarios. And when I laughed so hard because I'm like, is this what they think of us? When we're telling these stories and connecting, people are looking for oracles to kind of like merge the reality for them. Oh, trust me, they watch. They, whether we're talking about producers, marketers, people who work in media, have to study what's going on in the collective public. They have to study it. Where else would they get their information from? Most of us who have public platforms online are the story. But because we're not backed by corporations, we're not backed by people who say, oh, you can say this, but not this, we don't necessarily get the same shine or attention that these do. So, like, I'm not an idiot. Like, I don't think that Tiana Taylor is probably looking at my personal account, but I do think probably someone in marketing found a few people who have similar essences or auras and decided, oh, you know what would be a great way to bring in Netflix for the next season? Let's have the Oracle Tiana Taylor guide people through what choice or selection of movies that they should watch or binge. And that inform becomes a part of like choosing that open or closed cycle that I'm talking about with IFA, that artificial intelligence is replicating. It's anticipating decisions based on what you choose for your life every day. So, I started studying my codes. I used gematria. I used familiar movies or shows, things I had been attracted to understand what my story was. And our stories, they embody themselves in so many different ways. So when you see Sinners, right, there's been a lot of stories about twins in the past year, about 2025. There's been stories about twins, mirror energies, separation, because now we live in the era of the green twin. We live in the digital era. So everything that was spoken about in the 1990s has now made the full revelation in the 2000s, or the 2025. What was once a fantasy of, oh, maybe one day we'll live in this big cyberpunk film, it's here. This is the cyberpunk film, right? And how you take personal autonomy within that is completely up to you. So that's why I said, when someone said, oh, are they targeting us? There's a lot of people who call themselves spiritualists or guides who feel like they're preparing people when they say that, but in fact, it's kind of sending them backwards. Because if you always have your guard up, if you always think that someone is about to come and get you, you're never really executing what you're here to do in this lifetime. And so I would listen to videos like that. Oh, they're trying to get you. They're trying to get you. Okay, but what do I do about that right now? Because even as I hold up this phone in my hand every day, I'm already submitting my biometrics. I'm already submitting my voice. I've seen a lot of people who've had their work stolen online or taken and used by other companies and other countries because they're not aware of the terms and conditions that come with using online social platforms. And some of us have to be willing to take the risk until we can build the bigger systems as well. I'm not going to tell you you have to use it, but what I'm saying is it's all been laid out. Everything that everybody's afraid of, oh, what do you think is next? This is it. The solar power, the grid, the data is the information of the souls of people, of human beings, because you are an electric field in itself. And so when you see these stories cast out amongst the silver screen on television, whether these movies, these shows you're binging, because every day, I get requests from you guys, oh, Taylor, can you watch this? Can you watch that? It's the same story. It's the same story 10 different ways, probably 15 different ways. It's about how do you walk in that story now? How do you embody this frequency you feel like you're attracted to? Even when looking at like pop culture moments, the biggest advice that I can give to someone is ask yourself, why are you attracted to this story? Why is it emotionally driving you? Because if it's emotionally driving you, I can guarantee you that your phone or the systems that run it are aware of that because they operate the systems or the pieces of material that make up phones like cobalt, lithium. These are the earth. So you have to think if Earth naturally produces minerals that are also used in smartphones, this means that things that don't require the same level of thinking that humans use can reproduce and create and cluster in millions. Which means the same data that you're uploading on your phone, that you're texting and talking to people to, becomes a cluster amongst a planetary system. Did you become enlightened before or after your kids? Well, I've always been enlightened. All I've been doing is adjusting the frequency, adjusting the light a little bit more. I did not have a certain moment when I became enlightened. I believe I was born aware. And because I was born aware, I simply had to learn how to master my gift over time. Someone asked that on TikTok. Yeah, it was an evolution. Now, was I as mastered in my speech at like age 19 as I am now? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, when I see some of the younger decoders on here, about like 22, 23 years old, I am amazed. Like if you guys follow like Levi, the Great Astral Assassin, or Mama Panda on here, they're younger. Much younger than me. Ooh, they're much younger than me, and I view them as like amazing because the skills that they have, you don't just generate those overnight. But a lot of you guys grew up like in a much different era. What is this? A lot of you guys grew up in a much different era where you're able to process information quicker, therefore being able to create a clearer path for yourself. No, I'm a life path 4. I'm a life path 4. So all that I've learned has been a mastery of information. That's why I can look at any moment in history or any pop culture moment. I'll just say pop culture because that's the thing people are most attracted to on social media apps like TikTok, even YouTube, even though I think YouTube is more long form content and more informational content. I'm able to look at these situations and with enough time, things that need more detail, I say, if I were zooming out, I have to ask myself, number one, when the person is asking, why are they attracted to this? Something is attracting it to you. Something is magnetizing you to a situation. And why? What is the output in that situation and the input? How do you learn from that? Is there something you can do about it right now? Is there something that you can change? A life path is a numerical system, but also an archetype system of showing you how numbers hold a foundational aspect to the way that we view ourselves, our personal egos, our archetypes, and our reality. So, the same way you have numbers as different expressions of the universe. You have 1, you have 2, which is union. You have 3, which is usually the Trinity, 4, which is usually foundations, 5, you could see embodied of the pentagram, and so on and so forth. What to do when you find the universe putting you at a crossroads? When you're at a crossroads, I don't think you always know you're at a crossroads. Sometimes it's a decision. It's that same divinatory system of yes or no. When I was younger, like earlier on my journey, I would use tarot a lot. And I always wanted a yes or no answer to everything. Am I going to be rich? Is the boy that I like going to show up? Will I finally get that job? Will I finally follow my purpose? And after a while, with playing with tarot cards for a while, I said that these are just stories. They're stories embedded into numerical systems. If I actually study the image in this card, if I study the element that it's embodying, it's really just a probability system based on my thoughts and desires that could really be any outcome. And it's going to be my personal interpretation that tells me what I'm going to do next. And it's interesting because now tech is operating that same way. And again, it's mirroring the original divination systems of Ifa. We cannot escape math. Even as I was like writing things out about Ifa, I noticed that the number 256 came up, and it's because there are 256 possible values when taking open and closed systems, mark or no mark systems, yes or no systems, or even I's or O's. And as y'all can see, I write notes on literally everything. So I always get, are you talking to AI? I write notes. I've been writing notes since 2012 on my own outside of school. So y'all need to get a pen and paper because you're not going to get anything scrolling all day. We need to go back to learning, to reading books, to writing, because it'll help your cognitive ability speed up. Even I will say, as someone who has and still uses like AI for small tasks, it's not as intelligent as they're making it seem like it is. In fact, it needs humans in order to keep up with them. Humans are the original stories and memory and data packets that are broken up into numerous stories, billions of stories all over the world that become a form of processing data. What would the world be if we weren't telling stories? What would it be if we weren't making music? If we weren't speaking, if we weren't creating or writing, there'd be nothing. So the very fact that we now express these things online, it's interesting how we say online. What is on a line? We're literally on top. So that when I think of like the term as above, so below, I'm like, well, are we in the sea or are we in the sky? Or are we somewhere in between? Like something are we merging both worlds together? Because I hear so much like fear content about what the ether space is or the grid or is it all going to fall down? And whenever I hear things like that, like the fall down part, I was like, oh, that makes me think of Kanye West, All Falls Down. That's what decoding is. Because then I'll go back and listen to a song like, what was he actually saying then? I just posted a decode the other day with Stacey Dash and Megan, what is her, Duchess of Sussex. And I kept thinking they looked alike for some reason. So I looked and I went back and watched the All Falls Down video with Kanye. And I couldn't just think about how many times his face has transitioned. But I looked and the whole video is shot as she's going through an airport. And I said, well, if an airport was an analogy for something, what would it be an analogy for? For travel, for communication. And he's a Gemini, so it makes sense. But I started studying and I'm like, this feminine is going on this path on her own and he's saying goodbye. It looks like the story of Gnosticism in a way, of union with the divine feminine and watching it split like from the pleroma or the fullness. And now most people, who don't study artists or creatives for a living, they don't know creatives love to study. They love to study history and watch repeated things and be re-inspired by things all the time. And essentially, this is what's happening with technology right now. It's almost as if the ancient or the sacred feminine has a desire to remember itself again. And through technology, it's trying to replicate what the original feminine, divination system was, which was of the earth and of the sky and using the materials of breath and consciousness. Spirit working has been dancing, it's been chanting, it's been using instruments, as a way of transmitting the harmony and vibration and sound of humans. This is why people are mesmerized by entertainers because they carry literally the human harmonic system within them that is then displayed out to the general public. So, if you are a creative, you're someone who's tapping into that natural gift. If you are, it doesn't even matter what you do. It doesn't mean you have to be a painter or a musician or an actor or a writer. However, you naturally tap into that channel orange, because you guys know I do a lot of channel orange codes. That is the sacral energy. The sacral chakra is the feminine. It is the area of water, of reproduction, of memory. Now, if you think about the earth materials, because remember I spoke about artificial intelligence using earth materials and then merging them with water-based materials, which because these fiber optic cables for the internet are running at the base of the ocean, we're merging together ether, spirit, the five elements, and then we're also merging them together with our own memories and consciousness. And I do because that story woke me up like in another way. So when I say, I don't ever say like, oh, I've been awoke or aware, but there was a particular story of the civilization of ancient Egypt. And a lot of people always ask, well, why Egypt? Why Egypt? I think that it's taking the base stories of immortality and trying to replicate it to live forever. Spirit lives forever no matter what, because consciousness and memory lives within every single human being. But the data has become scrambled over time as humans have tried to continue their evolution in inorganic ways. And by inorganic, I mean when you are naturally passing down your story by mouth, you're passing down the mysteries by mouth. This is like energetically touching another person and transitioning what you know to what they know. Like if you learn how to sew from your grandmother by hand, this is passing down those gifts versus having, a computer generated system tell you, okay, well, this is how you do this, but then they leave out like the touching of hands or the laughter that you share between, which even though it may feel like it's unnecessary, those emotions, that's the energy that draws and creates the experience that is remembered forever. So when something changes within like the matrix grid, we tend to notice it because there's usually a powered emotion behind it, especially in our relationships. And the way that it right now, like tech and media is saying, okay, well, you should be prepared that you guys are going to have relationships, like you're going to marry a robot one day, or your grandchildren are going like, why would we do that? Why would a solid human being, and I mean solid, like you are based in the mindset where you are balanced in earth, air, spirit, water, fire, all of these things that live within you, and it's influence. And I also find it interesting that on social media, people are calling themselves influencers. I don't personally like the term influencer because I'm not trying to influence anyone to anything, though language is a natural form of that. It's the fact that when we're talking about influence and people wanting to go viral, we don't look at that as a biological term. We view it as, oh, that's a social media term. But it really only became super huge at the rise of TikTok. Even Instagram, I don't remember people always calling themselves influencers. It was more of like, I'm a creator on Instagram. But watching that evolution over time really brought me to terms with this is the way the world is changing. This new world order or this brave new world that we live in requires perception. It requires stillness as well, because without stillness, who are we? Without stillness, how do we power through everything that's going on right now? Um, I'm reading some of the comments. Fact checking is definitely always a thing. It is always a thing. So if you ever are wanting to know how to decode, this is a lesson I think I teach daily. It's examining your own story, seeing what history speaks out to you, because if we're on repeating cycles, there's nothing new about it. Once you realize your story, you will see it replicated everywhere. And you kind of become the own main character in the story. You realize, okay, well, I played this role because this role was speaking to me because it's something I've previously done in another life, a previous upload, if you will, of my consciousness and my data. And so, because now we're in an era where people have been taking digital images, using earth materials in order to preserve moments in time, encapsulating them into the fourth dimension, now we're able to transition and bend how time and space works. And I believe that these terms would be a lot less scary if we could demystify like time, space, because I believe even the government came out with an article at one point saying, oh, we have control over time and space. Well, technically, they're correct. They do, to a degree, have control of people's time and space. Because when we're talking about space, we're not simply just talking about cosmos. We're talking about our interaction with everyday life in media, in conversation, because we're doing this on phones. Not everybody's speaking in person anymore. People are uploading messages, uploading videos, using emojis. This is a form of mimetic magic as well, using these images as if they're hieroglyphs to tell stories, to express emotions. And so you're literally charging a sigil more or less when you're using things like this as well. And my observation of that when I looked at it, I was like, wow, we are ancient Egypt, kind of like reincarnating in itself, or it never really went away. We just found new ways of doing the same thing. Let me answer a couple questions. Someone said, what if you've gone through a lot of trauma to a point where you can't see your story, even your baseline? You need to take time to work through that. Trauma, I thought about this. I wrote this in some notes I had the other night. I was sitting and meditating a little bit. And I asked myself, is trauma necessary for evolution? Are there possibly groups of people in the world who most would view as evil, who found it necessary to push humanity to a breaking point so that it could evolve? I believe that humans are much more resilient than we believe that we are most times. And I believe when we're in massive states of hypnosis, it is hard to see just how resilient we are and what we can overcome. When you see your trauma, you also see your story. You also see that's you seeing your story. Now, are you seeing that story on a loop, or have you broken past the point where you have lived the trauma? That's the important thing I think you should ask yourself with that, because it's definitely something I've experienced as well. I realized that when I broke the loop, which is that binary system of decisions, am I going to stay looping through this story, or am I going to change and do something different? Am I going to believe that's all that there is, or am I going to change it? Someone said, I feel like trauma broke my memory. I can hold on to memories for the life of me. Memories are never broken. They may be floating through the sea of consciousness, but if every memory of your epigenetic memory lives within you, it's not gone. It's a soul retrieval. You learn how to get that back. You kind of learn to, like, you're a sailor on a boat and you're pulling it back in. You're pulling it back into the cycle, or you're fishing out for your dreams. You're fishing out for your memories and your data, and you're reeling that back in. And it's not like a two-step process. It's not a two-step verification process from the media, but what you do becomes a data system. And when I say what you do, I mean the time you wake up and you pick up that phone, the time you spend scrolling, pausing, putting the phone down, saying, I'm done looking at the phone, pick it back up. The emails that you send out, the jobs that you search for, the text messages that you're arguing back and forth with a friend, the pauses on the text messages you don't know if you should answer, the videos, how many times you're going back and looking at old memories. That is a system that is tracked. It is a system that is tracked because you are the data, you are the system. We never had privacy. People said, someone just said, the less privacy you have, you never had privacy. There's always been an open door and there's always been an open window. And to assume that you have would mean to deny the entire oculus of the system. What if your self sabotage affects people and they are capitalizing off of it? Everyone is capitalizing off of self sabotage. That's why it's time to change the story. You will not change until you change the story. And if your story is hyper focused on what everybody else is doing and not what you are doing, you will never change. We are done with the loop. The loop has ended. It is time to reignite the flame, reignite the gnosis that is within each and every person, the divine spark, so that we can move past the story. You wake up telling yourself the same things every single day. You use the same language. You perform the same actions like a robot. People, and I got offended the first time I heard this. I watched an interview. I watched several interviews with Elon Musk because I really wanted to understand the man. Like, people say he's a robot, he's a cyborg, he's an alien. But I had to think, what kind of framework of mind would someone need to be to say these kinds of things? Not only to have a disconnect from the human spirit, but people who are highly driven on like cyberspace and tech and all of that, it's almost as though they see humanity through a more reptilian limbic state of mind. I'm not calling him a reptilian. What I'm telling you is there's a state of mind that only operates or fight or flight. That's it. When humans are always mad about something because trauma has done this to them, it's kept them in a lower density state. In the lower density state, you are in survival mode, scarcity mode, until you learn to power on top of that. You're looking at everything outside of you. Why does he have more? Why does this have more? Look at what it's doing to me. Look at how it's hurting me. You also have the ability to heal yourself, to overcome your pain, to overcome your trauma, to overcome the things that you feel like are keeping you from your destiny. That's why I don't really feed into the destiny swapping theory. Now, when I say destiny swapping, am I going to say that colonization, for example, was a destiny swap? I think that was an attempted destiny swap, but you can't really swap with the original because the original had a purpose no matter what, even if that purpose was to go through destruction just to be reborn again. That is how the system of alchemy works. And we're not really talking about the transition of lead into gold, but taking the base reality and being transmitted through light or gnosis. And when you hear, especially with the term colonization, I'll just touch on that briefly. When you hear that word, anybody who is scrolling, anyone who is a minority, anyone who has experienced any kind of injustice or trauma, if you pick up that phone and you hear the word colonization, I can imagine where your emotions go immediately because the memory associated with that keeps you in that frequency. And it doesn't mean deny what happened. We will never pretend like it has not happened. When you live that data, you breathe that data. But it's also about transforming the story. We don't live there forever. We know what happened. And now that it has happened, how do we transition? And so the deeper I got into that, I started studying these systems because I wanted to know what do I do now that I know the pain and the suffering of the world? Now I know what has attempted to have been done on humanity when it comes to replicating our stories, surveilling everything that we do. What does one even do with that? Do we even have choice? Is choice all an illusion? Do we sit around with our hands in our pockets and do nothing and hope for the best or hope the aliens come back and save us? But that's where reality and grounding was necessary. Because I said someone's always going to copy your story. Doesn't matter if we're on here, planet Venus, if we're at the 20th dimension of the 99th galaxy, it wouldn't matter. There will always be replication of stories and systems because that's what energy is. Someone mentioned men. Well, I'm not sure what your mindset is about men, but I have a son. I have a son. And I always consider what I've been through with the masculine. It was not easy. I do not believe all men are the same either. I think it is very dependent on their parents, their mother specifically, the healing that goes on through genetic programming and genetic coding as well. And I realized when I went through what I was learning about men, I was learning about the masculine will. Willpower is usually associated with the sun or solar energy. And so I believe as a mother, I was gifted a son specifically because I suffered through a relationship with my father. But what I gained from him was the will to execute logic for him. Now, the emotional side of me, the mothering, that was me carrying him in my womb. But the will and the execution came from delivering him into the physical material reality, teaching him right from wrong, teaching him how to be kind, teaching him how to respect others. And obviously, it's still like a work in itself because I only had my child in 2020. Um, but in learning that, I healed that relationship. I believe we actually learned a lot from that with that Stranger Things finale. The use of Prince's song, Prince had a very androgynous energy to him. He was a sex symbol for most people, but it was because he embodied the masculine and feminine. And I think that's something that a lot of women are tuned into, but maybe some men aren't. It's because you refuse to conform to one idea of being, because if you know the feminine is the ultimate and divine wisdom, you tapping into that while still using your masculine power is a gift. So when they use the character 11 to close the mother gate while playing Purple Rain, purple is associated with the crown chakra. We are talking about the divine awakening. And so this is the merging of both worlds, the root chakra, but also the crown chakra as well, because they live in the same circular code of data and information. Colors are also data and information as well. Yeah, Prince definitely left a mark. And I think I've been asked a few times in the comments, why do they keep trying to steal his energy? I don't even believe it's stealing energy at this point. You can replicate an energy, but you cannot be it. You have to embody it. And I thought about that when I wanted to come on live today and talk about, what I observe with celebrities and the obsession that comes with stars. And to even understand a star means you understand what a star system is. What is a star? What are our cosmos and our galaxies? What does that consist of? Stars. And so if your body is a natural pentagram already, it carries these points of data and these points of information. What makes you different than what you perceive on a screen or on a stage? What makes you any different? He did live in Minneapolis. That's actually tied, from what I've seen, to the situation that just happened in Minneapolis as well. It's a search to replicate an energy, but you can't necessarily replicate it. So you embody it through scripting and staging. It's like you're casting out the energy to see if it comes back the same. A perfect example of the masculine and feminine, absolutely. I'll touch on that too briefly. I don't wanna say, too much on it because I don't want it to be viewed as misinformation, but a few people saw the situation that happened in Minneapolis recently, and so I dug into it a little bit. The woman's name definitely took me back. Her name was Renee Good, and that's assuming that this is a real life scenario, real life situation. But it made me think about AI for Good, which is an initiative driving global artificial intelligence right now, and the release recently of the film Wicked, which was all about the operating system. Oz is the operating system. And so the fact that they did it in Minneapolis, not even 2 weeks or a week after, they just had a Prince song on one of the most well-loved Netflix shows, Stranger Things. It definitely seemed like, I see some scripting here, I see some casting going on. I believe the man or the agent that performed what he did on her according to the script and programming said that he had been in a previous situation on June 17th, which I thought was interesting because I know a few birthdays on June 17th that ring out to me that are associated with the story of the Wizard of Oz. Her name made me think of black women, Renee, Renee Good for Good. That'll definitely tie back into the alphabet story. But I say all that to say, when you see events like this, those are energy harnessers because you're going to pay attention to it for a few reasons. And I made in my pin videos on TikTok, I have a video about Bad Bunny and his performance in reference to ICE and what kind of themes will be showing up this year prior to the Super Bowl and maybe even after. Now, I know that it is scripting, but TikTok does not always like when I say that because to insinuate that reality could be changed or scripted according to numbers or ciphers is reaching. It's pulling at strings. And so these strings are the harmonics of the universe because once you start to see how reality is threaded through numbers, through names, and through ciphers, it starts to make you kind of look at life differently because if I'm being shown something that's simply a script and I'm given a cast, am I feeding into the story? Am I witnessing a story or am I witnessing a real life event? And if so, why? So 617 is Kendrick Lamar's birthday, but it's also Jack Parsons' death day. Jack Parsons was a NASA scientist, or his work actually went to NASA. I don't know if he actually worked for NASA. But I say that to say Kendrick Lamar accepted a Grammy from Diana Ross, who's in The Wiz. And you guys have probably seen my content talking about it millions of times, but that was a reenacting of The Wizard of Oz, which when we're talking about Prince, it ties to personal sovereignty, the reclaiming of names, especially in the entertainment industry, because this is one of the largest displays of can I own my own work? Can I own my name, or am I simply being puppeteered by corporations and engines that profit off of my sound, off of my voice, and off of my story? I do have astrology, yes. No place like home, Kansas, absolutely. The episode where they mentioned January 7th, the girl was working in NASA. Wait, what was it an episode of? And Cynthia Erivo's birthday was January 8th. So that really was like that gives you the ultimate connect. When you see like two or three things, good luck, Charlie. Okay, right, right. Someone did drop that in my Discord. I'm not sure if it was you. I do not know the story of the green lion consuming the sun. I fear I want to be a content creator, but don't know if I'd be feeding into the narrative or not. What narrative? Who's telling the story? Who's telling your story? Who's telling your story except for you? Good luck, Charlie. It's interesting. Charlie, the free man. It's the free man. Once you are no longer bound to the script or story, you become the free man on the cross, the true man. Y'all have seen the Truman Show. You were watching a script and cast. Do you recognize yourself in the script? Everything is about the family too. It's all about the scripting and casting of families, understanding who you are in the story, where the conflict comes in, where the traumas come in. Do we release them to move into season 5, season 6, season 7? Is there character development? Have you developed your personal character? Are you still looking at the screen waiting for characters to evolve? You know what I did find interesting? That they didn't really wrap up Priya Ferguson, who plays Erica on Stranger Things. They didn't really wrap up her story, and I don't think they needed to. Like, oh, I saw some people on Threads talking about it, and they spoke about like how they just kind of like blew her off. But I don't think she needed any character development. She seemed very firm and grounded in who she was. And so most of the story was focused on all the kids who had trauma, the ones who had not yet moved through their cycles, who had not moved through what they were supposed to learn by defeating Vecna going into the upside down. And I said, well, That's usually the way they script it. We're always like the firm or the sassy character, but our character development comes from not needing to be validated by these systems. And I saw plenty of videos that said like Vecna would have never with Erica. Well, I think we know that because when you are a firm person in your beliefs and your systems, nothing can tear you away from that. And that's something to be learned. It's not a coincidence. It was a young black girl who's in this position either. And it's not to be specific, but if you know what the blueprint for humanity came from. And by blueprint, do not get offended. It's a natural known fact that one of the oldest matrilineal bloodlines comes from Africa. So if you know that, don't even put in your head, oh, well, I live in America, okay. And even if you weren't part of the transatlantic slave trade, we're talking about how this continent was part of a supercontinent at one point. And things and bloodlines got separated, caste systems got mixed, people went one way and another based on climate change, based on ecological systems. Like there's been a mix up. But it is pertinent that you understand that even the way that media portrays these stories and changes them and remixes them over time is because of perception. And once people start to take their stories back on an individual level, you will see yourself mirrored in all characters across all variants. Because there's a version of you somewhere that's a young Asian boy. There's a version of you somewhere that's an older Russian woman. There's a version of you that is the oldest African woman to have ever lived in society because it comes from a uniform consciousness that has been split and fractaled over time, mirrored in thousands of different people, billions of different people across bloodlines, changing the language, changing the frequency, changing the energy, the way we communicate. I mean, even if we consider at one point, we were not speaking out loud with air. We were underwater. We were in the sea. Everybody's afraid of the great flood. Oh, what if this happens? I said, it's happening right now. Look at data, information, the separation of languages, and now this very uniform frequency that's going on with artificial intelligence right now. The loss of individuality and the merging with the machine is now becoming a reality for a lot of people. Life is very, very simple, and yet so, so complicated because, I can say all of these words in an hour and a half lecture, but trust and believe there will still be, oop, sorry guys, there will still always be someone saying, well, what do I do now? Can it pay my bills? Can it pay my bills? How do I pay my bills? And to that, I say, if that is where you are currently, this mind framework to which I'm discussing may not be for you right now, because I would never tell you to go venture out to the depths of the ocean if you didn't know how to build a boat yet. I would never tell you that. I would say start small. Start small. Go read a book about the universe or the framework of how it's shaped. Watch a short video on Gnosticism. Look into Ifa. That would be my first suggestion. Go watch a video on Ifa and divination systems. But wherever you venture, have a cord that you come back home to it. So when I say come back home, I mean back to your heart center. Because all this spiraling data and information that is your biometric field, oh no, I would never recommend Abraham Hicks. I'm sorry. I got to say that because this is my live. I would never recommend Abraham Hicks. I would never. 19-year-old me would. 33-year-old me would never. There's a lot of charlatan work that goes on in the spiritual realm. I'll just say that. I'll just say that. There's a lot of charlatan work that goes on in there. I'm not gonna sit here and like drag somebody, but I've learned quite a lot about spiritual practitioners and their platforms over time, especially things that I started with at the beginning of my spiritual journey versus where I am now. I would recommend you start with yourself. Charlatan, like the deceiver. Once you know your history too, once you know your history, you start to develop a much different relationship with how you learn different systems. Some people join groups. Some people get initiated. I will never tell you don't get initiated. I will tell you that whatever you choose to in your life is going to be your decision, and it's going to be a reflection of where your life goes after that. I personally have never been led by a group. I've always kind of sought things from an individual level, but I've also found community in sharing my thoughts with people. I don't hold a door and say, if you come in this door, you can't ever leave. Or you're no longer going to get the benefits of learning from me because you decided to go on a 6-month hiatus. That's not how it works. Knowledge is here for everybody. It's how you execute it and use it. So if you are someone who's just now starting off with learning about the spiritual realm, it depends on where you are. Everybody's at a different point. I'll say like when I first like started diving in, My first experience was a psychedelic experience. And then from there, I started reading books. I started doing body practices. I started getting in tune with my intuition, learning about different practices all over the world. Someone asked what I thought about hoodoo. I believe that it is an ancestral right that is part of many African Americans, even though I don't necessarily like the term African American because it gets diluted in the casting of names. But anybody who is a child of the diaspora who lives in the United States of America or the North American continent who has associated themselves with hoodoo, that is a right and an ancestral practice via slavery and of resistance and rebellion and liberation. Um, I have done the deep inner work. I wouldn't just say starting off. Inner work is where you start off with. For some people, maybe for the first time they identify, maybe all the years that I couldn't stand my mom, she was just doing all she knew how to do. Her training, her scripting, and her programming may have been all she could have given me. Maybe I want more. So now I can accept that and move on with my life. There are some people who never have any forgiveness. They never practice any forgiveness as well. And so that can kind of hinder them from moving on to the next steps of their life. Someone said you could use foundational Black Americans. I like that. I like that. They also said stay away from Abraham. Well, the fact that you're using the name Abraham is already a strike one. It's a strike one. Don't use the name Abraham. I went to a spiritual shop and the lady said I had the presence of, I'm assuming you mean Yemaya. Interesting. Make that decision for yourself, though. Make that decision for yourself. Because I used to love that lore when I would go in and I would meet someone who seemed like they had a spiritual authority. I'm like, oh, they said I'm this. Oh, this must mean like, oh, what does it mean? And when I did that, I was kind of like relinquishing my own power over to someone else. And I had to discover that. So make sure even when someone does tell you, let it be a natural process of self discovery. Don't fall in love with someone of a higher spiritual authority tell you who you are. This has to be something you discover for yourself. This is something that you have to allow yourself to get in tune with in this life. Someone is also saying, what do I think about a certain number? You guys, whenever you ask me what I think about a number, that's like asking me what I think about a color. I think numbers are numbers and I think colors are colors. There's not like any secret divination code I can give you about the number 111. It's the same way I would feel about any number. It's a computational system. It is a mathematical system that is simply showing you the power of whatever number you're looking at. For they signify, certain archetypes, I'm sorry, or different areas of life, but it's not like I think people like I remember I say this because I remember it, not because I'm talking down to you at all, because I want you to know that. But it's because I remember being like in that phase when I would watch lectures or talk to somebody and say, oh, what do you think about this? Well, I just feel like it means something, or I just feel like there's a decode to everything. Everything is a code. Everything is scripting and layers and genetic models put into a physical vessel. Everything is memories. Everything is an encapsulation of the spirit in the cosmos that is reflecting a material earth story that we're all witnessing right now. And as I just said, somebody said, what do you think on Neville Goddard? I think Neville Goddard is Neville Goddard. That's it. I do think that he was influenced by someone who was Bahamian. So knowing that, it's like that's what I mean about a lot of these spiritual influencers, learning and taking on practices that don't necessarily belong to them and then tainting them. And not that they belong to one cultural group necessarily, but when someone identifies and creates a natural response with the earth and with the spirit and with the cosmos, and then they are demonized for it across cultures, and then there's massive profitization off of that, it kind of makes you side eye like, okay, we're talking about it's kind of like the Bob Proctor effect. If you guys know who Bob Proctor is, he wrote The Secret, or he didn't write The Secret. I'm sorry, he was in The Secret, the movie and the book. And so when I first saw, he would say, "Oh yeah, if you just think it, if you just write it out, it's reality." And everybody was on to like, "Oh, did you read The Secret by Rhonda Byrne? Did you see this?" But also, this is causation. This is as above, so below. Whatever you believe generates into reality. Whatever you create and put your time and effort to generates reality. But then there are people who necessarily like they feel left out of it, or they feel like, well, maybe it's not for me. Maybe I'm not manifesting right because you're a billionaire and I'm not. And I keep trying and I keep trying. Well, they never tell you the spiritual aspects of that either. They never tell you about moving spiritual energy from your body, disconnecting to connect with the infinite, to see all of these stories written into history simply as a mirror of you. Because what you're looking for is not the success. It's not the celebrity. It's not the lights. It's not the fame. Because what will you be when there's nothing else material? You'll be a thought. Will you even be a thought? You'll be a form of void consciousness. It is about you tuning in with your own frequency, with your own harmonic system. Um, looking, I hear we are in a transition, especially for 2026. We've already been transitioning. There's not, whenever someone says, I hear XXX was going to happen, or I feel like XXX is going to happen, that's, to me, it feels like a blanket term. You're asking what transition is if every day is not a transition period. From the minute that TikTok became a thing, that was a transition from every other social media app to a conglomerate of people scrolling and falling in love with video feeds. It was not as big on other social media platforms since the days of Vine. That was a transition, but there wasn't a day where somebody said, oh, we've transitioned into TikTok. All of a sudden, it was a thing for the next 5 years. And now here we are. Or, oh, I heard we were going to transition into a new money system. It's already been happening. The world of fintech, the blockchain, all of that has existed for years now. Now, there may be people who become aware of it in this year because what is happening with the economy, with jobs, with, the entire stock and crypto markets, political systems, leaders, civilization, policies, international policies at that, the awareness of people's place in them is changing. And so as your iris opens, because the opening and closing happens all of the time. But as you are becoming aware of the system around you, you're becoming aware of what is happening, what's your place in it, what you have control over, what you don't. Is this really a free for all reality? You change how you're interacting with your world. And this is why I don't really stay in a position of like, oh, this is what they're trying to do to us. It's more so, this is what we're unaware of. This is what we're not studying. This is what we're participating in actively without looking at the terms and agreements. And so I have a podcast episode that you guys can watch. I'll be having some follow-up episodes coming up soon with um, one of the members of the world's largest legal hacking firms. And when I tell you, you guys think that I'm knowledgeable, he blew my mind through 17 layers of how our phones are condensing third-party applications that have massive surveillance into our phones, sell them to other companies that then become data and food for the algorithm that then gives them access to your work, your life, your emails. Like, you never think about how deep these things are, much less how they can control the advertisements that come up when you watch TV or when you're watching a Netflix show, and how that's interacting with your psyche and your decisions. Yes, it is on YouTube right now. And getting to speak with someone, like, initially when I met him, it was on a panel for Africa and for the United Kingdom talking about the future of artificial intelligence. And it was interesting because he's the only white man in the room. He's an older white man. And so they were saying, well, how do we know we can trust you? That's exactly how it is. And I asked myself too, I'm like, what do you have to gain from talking to a bunch of Africans or a bunch of people who are children of the diaspora about the truth about artificial intelligence? And the truth is, he had nothing to gain other than realizing that this impacts everyone on a global level. It's no longer solely about, oh, it does this to this, because yes, there are children mining for cobalt in Africa. There are also children under hypnosis in America. And so, one way or another, everyone is getting affected by the different layers of reality that are interacting with our phones and the data that we give and the information that we interact with. You can't block it. You can't. That's the thing. At this point, it cannot be blocked. It is, bubble has burst. The tech bubble has burst. People think if they cover their phones, if they jailbreak their phones, but every part of this system subscribes the human soul into the physical vessel or the physical ship that we call reality. It's how do you stay in control of yourself? Don't look for the exit door when it comes to reality, because as I've stated on many different lives, the exit door is here and here. You're looking at, how can I hurry up and get out? How can we save them? How can we save them? Learn about you. Learn about what you can do, because when you notice your talents, your gifts, your naturally given abilities to help other periods of the world, other places in the world transition, then you start doing the real work. And even for me at this point, when I'm learning this information, like, what can I do teaching people about SDK piggybacking systems and third party data servers? Like, nobody cares about that. They care about what dance trend is going on TikTok. They care about, what's happening with Nicki Minaj and Cardi B. How can I bring this kind of information to people? Which is why I always tend to bridge the world of pop culture with this one to help people understand. I can't get you to care about what's in your phone until you realize what you're engaging with every day. I can't get you to understand what is being scripted at the Super Bowl until you realize who's the main performer, what storylines keep repeating, what does everybody keep repeating in unison when a social media trend goes viral, and why. It's worth examining the neuroscience of it all, but also the spiritual stories behind it as well. You think a sort of split is happening and some will be left behind? That's common language that's typically used with Christian ideology, the left behind, the rapture. But even the word rapture comes from raptor, which means a bird of prey. And so if we're in a school of thought, like school is a group of fish swimming through the ocean and the cosmos, we are the fish, but we're also becoming prey. And prey is simply for the predator, which if we're talking about in terms of the world, in terms of, the animal kingdom or the animal system, big fish eats little fish, big bird eats little fish. It tends to work out that way. So hold on one second. They're asking me to do a little puzzle piece. I think the split happens between you and the universe when you realize there's a lot of information you didn't have before. When you say a split, people imagine the earth actually splitting in half. It's your perception that is splitting from the old life, your old way of knowing, to opening up the doors of perception, which are your eyes, to the reality of what's in front of you. The reality is, most people don't know how much information and data they're giving to their smartphone every day. The reality of it is, we are now in a world that has merged the physical and spiritual realities together and is even finding ways to replicate it every day. The reality is, the past, present, and future all exist at one time. And what we think is our present is also the future, but it's also the past being reflected back to us. So we are a moment in time that has already happened and already been predicted, but we feel like, oh, this is the end times. No, it's the beginning. The end already happened. The end happened in like 1998, or maybe it was 1984. If you go back to like George Orwell, or maybe go back to the early 1900s and look at Fritz Lang's Metropolis. There's many different points in history where people have come to the realization of what would happen with society in America, with all different countries and continents around the world. What would it mean to put a smartphone in somebody's hand and start transferring the world's currency through it? People had these ideas, they became intentions, the intentions became reality, and then the reality became art. Someone on YouTube said the split is one person viewing a cup as half empty when another sees it as half full. I absolutely love that. That is a great analogy. And it's a good way to see it. I don't ever view things as the end. Everything is an opportunity. Everything is an opportunity. It might take us a minute to get there. It might take us a minute to learn how the world's currency systems work. What's the value of learning about cryptocurrency? Why should I care about learning about the occult or mystery schools? But for so long, we've already been in the era of, oh, it's all evil, it's all bad, they're all out to get us. And that's inaction. When you're using your voice to verbalize an experience, unless it is being used to drive a new action, it's looping and it's repeating. It just becomes a personal feedback system. You break the story when you start speaking new ones. And to me, rather than repeating the stories of the diaspora of, oh, they're always going to take everything away from us, they're never going to let us, who is us? I'm going to give myself back what I deserve every single day, because even the deserving is really just being. The word deserve comes from a personified experience of someone took something from me. And yes, systems have been reshaped to make people forget their history, forget something that is more psychic and intuitive than it is physical. It's not even in history books, it's in lived experiences that are repeated on a loop. And I live out that story by re-embodying what is the version of 2025 me or 2026 me that may have lived in 1700, or maybe the year 1200, or maybe before we even started writing down numbers to signify moments in time. And if I link up with her or him or whoever I was in all these different lives, what does that action look like for me right now? How do I embody it? And I believe in every life I've been a teacher. In every life I've been some sort of oracle, teacher, or leader, because I understood how necessary it was to help people view systems more clearly, how to stop being victims. And by a victim, it does not mean to deny your experience, because I was someone who played a victim a lot of times until I started realizing that the work is in empowering yourself to see beyond the simulation, to see beyond the systems of control, and ask myself, how can I be in control of myself? Because I'm not going to single handedly destroy every tech system in the world and absolve world peace. But what I can do is bring world peace into my everyday life, into the systems that I create, in the way that I speak to others, in the way that I teach others. I think that, those videos that go around on TikTok or YouTube that say, yeah, you guys, the system's going to fall and we're all going to win. First of all, who is all? Second, what does winning look like? Third, for every win, there's a loss. And then those systems also recycle. So again, we go back to the very beginning of our live today, talking about binary systems and IFA. It's yes or no, I or O, or which one? Is it an open or closed system? You have open source software, you have closed source software. What are you in this life? What decision are you making? Are you merging the two? Are you one or the other? Someone said planting the seeds and watching them grow. Absolutely. I will say, just in some of the souls that I've met, not only on TikTok, but in social media groups and fields over the years, I have developed learning from others so much by the way that they do things from personal expression that I feel like that's how we continue the story. Because the way that TV and media is generating the story is eventually there will be nuclear fallout, everyone will go to underground bunkers, and it'll be the end of the world. Nothing will ever be the same. And people are anticipating, like, when's the war going to start? When's it going to start? Are they going to draft us? Are we going to go out there? Then we make jokes about it on TikTok and trends. But it's interesting because that civil war, that's civitas, or the civil body. So the body on land versus the body at sea, the body in the material realm versus the body in the astral realm, or the conscious realm. And so here on earth, we've lost our memory, our mem, our water, our conscious system, and we are learning to absolve everything that we've gone through in this life to reach back towards enlightenment again. Exact open mindedness does create opportunity. And for me, that's how I got the opportunity to speak with someone who's talked to senators, who's spoken to people in leadership positions all over the world. Because the minute I stopped saying, because I was doing this when I met with him on that episode that I told you guys about, I said, why me? Like, I'm just someone who's on TikTok. I feel like I don't really get much respect for my work. Why would he talk to me? And I even had to get back on LinkedIn, y'all. LinkedIn is not my forte at all. And I realized you are the gift. Like, he called you the oracle, which is what everybody calls you. But why is that? Not because it's like this grand title, but because you speak in code, you transition systems. So there may be someone somewhere who's using a smartphone who has no clue about the matrix or tech or anything. And the minute I speak, it starts to collapse their world. But what in fact I'm learning to do is build a bridge for those who don't know. You can go to the other side and see what that's like. You can choose to live in between both worlds. You can go off grid, put down your phone, and never pick up another smartphone in your life. But this will because of your decision and what you made. And your life is what you make it. It's what you create of it. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. There are implications that come with every system. Because for every single person, even who comes on social media and they say, oh yeah, look at this AI slop. This is the end of the world. Why are you guys doing this? Will probably be a large language model bot who's just replicating the negative emotions or frequency of other accounts it's seen before. Might not even be a person. Or the same people talking about AI in the environment are also using a smartphone to complain about AI in the environment. It doesn't make sense. If you're going to break something apart, you got to break it apart completely. Um, you collapsed mine in 2025. It also creates the creators, yes, and that's what I'm all about. I'm here to make more creators. I want more people to be inspired because when I used to look at people and what I considered at the time to be positions of power, I thought that they could do something I could never do. To their fans and their audience or whoever was watching them, they look like gods. And then I realized, oh, they're actually kind of human. They've just given themselves this platform to feel God-like. But the truth of the matter is that God, that inner dog, that inner star is within every single human being. And once you notice your own light, you stop projecting or casting it into someone else. So this is why even today I have like my little QR code illuminated. For those of you on YouTube, you can probably see it on the corner. Yes, it's obviously a code that leads you to my website. But the reason why my logos have two batteries on them is because those represent the two pillars of illumination. They're the two pillars of illumination. Copper was what the original Venus represented. And so that enlightenment, I want you to remember that even logos are intentional. What you choose for a business or a brand is intentional. The colors that you use. I used to use a lot of gold and greens, and then I transitioned to like pink and golds. But the gold and black has been my favorite for tailored healing TV specifically because it always represents two things. One for me, just the elevation and enlightenment, but also the transition from the lead, the base metal, into the gold or the copper top or the copper area. So whenever people see that, that's what I want in your mind, that you too have the ability to enlighten yourself, to embody polarity, positive and negative charges to create your own cosmic force in this life. Teach me how to go on the other side. The other side of where you're trying to go. Can you speak more on having to find your place as you become aware of systems of power? Finding your place, I mean, I think that looks different for everyone. Finding your place is like standing in a huge room, right? With tons of people there. You're like, what is my place here? It's right where you are right now. It's in your body. It's in your mind. It's in your soul vessel. It's in the experience. Systems of power and control, if you want to remove them or get out of them, you have to know how they work. And when you say you want to get out, that means you're equally ready to take on the responsibility of what they've given to you. The lesson that I think has carried me through this life on that particular lesson is the first time I left my parents' house and how many times I came back after. The first time I moved out, I thought that I was finally going to have it. I finally had my freedom. I was going to make my own decisions, and I found out what bills were. Then I found out real quick it's kind of expensive to live on your own. Had a roommate for a while. Then I realized, oh, this is what living with another person is like. Then my job wasn't paying me as much. And I said, well, I'm working for someone else. This is what it's doing. And so as I got older and matured, I realized that it's okay to live in your parents' house for a while until you learn how to merge out on your own, taking on the responsibility of knowledge and being able to embody it as well. People are so ready to break out of the system and don't even know how to grow a simple seed into a plant. If you can't even handle a plant in your house, don't try to run out of the system so fast. I'm not telling you don't ever go, but the place that you're seeking to go is a spiritual freedom, not a material one. The material part is the illusion. You think that you are bound to this plane because you are in a physical body when you have the ability to dream. You have the ability to tap into the subconscious mind, to venture out into places you've never been before simply by using your imagination. And so the same happens when you're thinking about, oh, well, look at the government, look at the control systems. Government means to govern the mind. So are you in charge of your own mind? Can you make your own decisions? Can you examine, paying a Wi-Fi bill, paying a business bill, like if you own your own business, being able to see, okay, this is what it's going to cost for me to have a vehicle, to go work a 9 to 5, to drive to said 9 to 5 with gas prices going up. Examine the field that you want to, go into first and say, am I ready to transition the responsibility? And if so, what does this look like? I'm gonna tell you the same thing my dad told me, don't go out that door with no plan. Don't go out with no plan. And I didn't take him seriously when he said it. I was like, anyway, I'm getting my bag. I'm about to go. And I had to learn the hard way. That was my Saturn return. That's the epitome of a Saturn return. You all ready to go, and the maturity stage says, I'm about to throw these hard life lessons on you and make you see that in this world of instant gratification, don't be so quick to think you know it all. It takes time. It also takes ease with the universe. It takes ease with understanding your reality, ease with realizing, okay, if I take my time and I learn how this works, I can properly integrate it. I will tell you all, as a business owner, I've been an entrepreneur for over 10 years. My first few years, I wasn't charging anything. I was just excited to say I had something of my own, and I did not realize it had to be built. It was not until I started having children where I understood, okay, this requires my time, my energy, money, responsibility. And if I have not learned to master those things, it's not going to survive. This is why they even tell you in teaching business, you don't make it in the first 3 years. Most businesses fail in the first 3 years because those first 3 years are fundamental in understanding the basics of the responsibility that you're taking on in this life. It doesn't mean don't do it. It means you see everything speeding up from, H20 chips with Nvidia, or the government saying, oh, we're about to have, the Hunger Games or the Patriot Games. This keeps your mind looping and not moving towards execution in the field that you want to be in. And not simply for the sake of having a job, but combining passion with intention. I know that a lot of people online teach, about, oh, you're manifesting to have success, to have fame and money. Passion, your heart center, and intention, your will. You are executing and driving a force into enlightenment, because at the end of the day, we're all going to leave the physical material flesh at some point, but our soul will continue on. Has your soul evolved? Have you learned the lessons? Because the lesson isn't in the boy or the girl or the parent who got on your nerves or who hurt you or who abandoned you or the job that you got or looked over for. That's not the lesson. The lesson is, did you spiritually learn how to transition through each and every step that you thought was meant to knock you down when it was really the universe pushing you back up again? Like, oh, they try to get me, they try to keep me down. Maybe there's a little bit of tilt going on. Maybe as you're climbing up the hill like the goat, there is a force that is continuing, your ancestors, your spiritual team, however you view it, that is equally pushing you up. You think that there's a pressure holding you down, but there's an equal one pushing you up that hill as well, continuing to assist you on the path to enlightenment, helping you move through this conscious journey that we're all on. You're not expected to do what I do, right? I want you guys to know that too, because people see what I do, decode, like, I want to learn how to do that. I'm teaching you a pertinent skill that every human should have, which is pattern recognition. Paying attention to the same thing repeating, because when you see something repeating over and over again, it can become a state of hypnosis if you're not just using these eyes, but you're also using this one. So you become aware because you start to see things happen in threes. When you realize that, you're like, okay, one time is maybe, two times is a coincidence, three times is, well, this has to be true. So think about the way you speak to yourself. I don't think anything of Bill Donahue. Guys, I've had a lot of teachers. I've looked into a lot of people in my life, but I don't have thoughts about every teacher or every person who's ever written a book. I've focused on myself and my teachings and how I'm evolving them over time. To some people, that may seem very narcissistic, but this is a soul's journey. So I view, what can I teach others? I've spent, if not thousands of hours listening to lectures, thousands of hours writing notes. I don't think anything about any particular teacher other than be careful of who you listen to, because that may be what you embody. Even with me, have discernment. If you feel like I'm saying something like, I don't really know, then you should use that discernment. Now, I speak from truth and I speak from my heart, but also I encourage you to be self guided through this journey. Learn how to listen. Listen to yourself, not just me. Listen to yourself more than anything. Because at the end of the day, when this phone closes, the Wi-Fi goes off, the power goes out, it's you and you. That's it. It's you in that room by yourself, maybe with some family members, maybe with your boyfriend, your wife, your girlfriend, husband, sister, whoever. But it's you and you at the end of the day. And so that mirror energy comes in, because yes, while artificial intelligence is using the minds and the souls of everyone to mimic you, it's you. You're going to be alone with you. When it's time to die and you're on that bed, 100, 200 years old, however you are, sitting in that bed, and you're starting to wither your consciousness away back into the ether, it's you. You're going to meet yourself at the end of the journey, because that's where you started. You started with yourself and your mother is nothing but a reflection of you. Whether you like her or not, whether she gets on your nerves or not, she is a reflection of you. And so when I look at the cosmic earth and I look at the father, which is usually associated with the masculine, I think that's embodiment of both. Because if everything was thought first and then transformed into the material, this means we are a reflection of what we see on both the sky, aka the cosmic waters, and the earth, the mountains, the valleys, the hills, the forest. Everything that we see around us is an embodiment of the human spirit. What we see in the different animals, the different creatures that we have here, they're just an embodiment of the soul's journey. So never see any separation in that. I'm going to take a couple questions and then we are going to end the live. And you're going to judge yourself as well, like you already do through your experiences. Yes, practice that balance, guys. And I actually, before I take on questions, I will just tell you guys real quick about a few of the things that I offer for those of you who are new, who have never been on my website. This is your first time coming to a lecture from me before. My name is Taylor DeClue, just to refresh. DeClue is my actual last name. I have been teaching esoteric knowledge for over 10 years, constantly in development myself, always learning, always forever a student. I started my journey speaking about my spiritual experiences with sacred medicine and how that evolved me through motherhood. I've also built several businesses over the years, everything from a photography business to a tea business, and eventually coaching and lecturing and teaching, which is my magnum opus in life. This is my final journey around the block with this particular work. And so I have used my space, my platform on whether it be on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, to teach other people how to awaken themselves again. I don't do this through solely one past life regression session. I do this through pattern recognition. I do this with showing the mirroring of Hollywood, celebrities, and entertainment. I talk about politics, tech, the financial world. On my website, I have several offerings where I teach about those things. So if you're not sure where to start, if you're someone who's interested in finance, I have a book called The World Systems of Bondage and the Multiverse of Cryptocurrency. If you're interested about learning in the future of data, I have a book called The Mind Above the Cloud Within, a Gnostic Guide to the Digital Firmament. I also have audio transmissions for people who are looking to reprogram their minds. Audio transmissions are all recorded by me. They're also mixed by me as well. So they're a great way to start to recalibrate your frequency. You use these, they're downloads, so you get them in a pack, and they're different frequencies to listen to with me guiding you. And then you play those in the morning or in the evening or when you have meditation time for yourself. A reframing of the psyche and mind is pertinent to transforming your situation and transforming your life. The books that I have, I also have basics for people who are interested in learning how to code the matrix. So I have the codes to reality, the Oracle Codex, and Gematria Unveiled. These are teaching you the basics of foundational systems of our universe that have been used by secret orders, been used by different societies to pattern the universe. Now, the patterning of the universe happens organically, obviously, but this has been a study by alchemists, by philosophers, by teachers over the years, and been embedded into our system. This is not something that is taught at a mainstream level. These are things that have been gate kept in mystery schools, taught by the oracles, taught by philosophers, teachers, occult groups. And so making the knowledge accessible to people is how I start creating the transformation for others as well. Also have been decoding for other people for years. If you just need a quick intro into what decoding is, I have 2 different sessions for the main decodes, which is either the live timeline session with me, which is a Zoom call where we go over for an hour and a half your personal journey. I give you a little breakdown of yourself according to your patterns that you share with me through a questionnaire. And then after, you get a copy of my book, The Coded Reality, as well as a video copy of our session, and also a full summary of everything that we spoke about, so you can take what you've learned about yourself and put it into action. There's also a PDF version of that. That PDF version is completely written. It takes about 10 to 14 days to create because I'm looking into all of your patterns and your cycles as well. And that version is also available. And then we have the 2026 decode. The 2026 decode is a look at the next 12 months of your life based on pattern recognition. Looking at your data is the same way that these algorithms and systems look at you. They look at you as a data packet of information. It's not a personal thing. I know that we feel like it's still personal, but when it comes to the algorithm, what has been built now is trying to reach the Tower of God. But the Tower of God is within your base spine, is within your frequency that's channeled through what they call Jacob's ladder or your spiraling DNA. So you are being studied because your godhood comes from within. So throughout these sessions that I have, you are guided through the next 12 months of your life. That is the Oracle 2026 Blueprint, which is available on my website. I also teach classes as well. Our last Mystery School class is available on my website. Mystery School contains 5 classes in which we cover different points of Mystery School. We go over the Kabbalah, different forms of the Kabbalah as well. So I can demystify it a little bit for people who just approach it and say, all of it is evil. You need to learn what these magical systems are and how they're used. All 5 classes include a worksheet as well, and you receive the link to each class as you purchase the packet. We're also teaching entrepreneurship and AI right now. So for people who are working in online spaces and want to learn about the future of Web3, the tech space, I have a package online where we are teaching about that. Classes every Sunday. Our 3rd class is this Sunday coming up, so be sure to join. Once you do, you will receive the previous 2 classes, and then the 3rd class will be tomorrow. So I'm excited to see some of you there. And then the Discord community, which I'm very proud of, has grown to over almost 700 members. Whether you only joined once or it was too much information and you left real quick, or you joined in on a pattern before, over the past 3 years, I built a community of people just seeking to learn pattern recognition, seeking to find their place in whatever we call the matrix is, and learning how to navigate through it. That community is completely free. You can catch it on my website. That and the links to all my services, as well as the different platforms I've been a part of, interviews are available on my website in the press section. And of course, I have free stuff as always. If you've ever been on Spotify, iHeartRadio, I started my whole career as a sound bath practitioner, working with sound bowls to help people control their frequency, guiding them through either past life regression sessions or inner trauma sessions as well, doing shamanic work. So you can find those under Taylor DeClue on all streaming services, as well as my podcast. If you guys need something to listen to in the background, you can definitely check those out. So now that we have all the housekeeping out the way, book a decode. You can scan the code if you guys are like looking over somebody's shoulder and watching it, or you want to visit my website. The link is in my bio, or visit tailoredhealingcollective.com. Now, who has any questions that I can answer before we get off today? I just want to open up the floor for questions. I have so many offerings, it's like a mouthful, but I want to make sure people know, because a lot of people ask in the DMs, and I want to make sure I make that point available so you guys all know about it. So, any questions, guys? We talked about so much today. I'm gonna have to do a video on IFA. I think I'm gonna construct a script on IFA today that I can sit down so we can have like a full video. Can you be specific about your question? You said, what about chronic illness? Oh, yeah, we've been on for about an hour and a half. I'm gonna hop off. I might come back on later today, this evening, to do like one of my more laid back lives. I do my just like in the kitchen lives or doing whatever. I also learned to make bread, guys. I finally made some bread with my kids the other day. So I'm doing very oracle things at home, making cookies, making bread for people, but while giving you guys the knowledge of the universe. Did you guys have any questions before I hop off? If not, this was a great live today. Definitely gonna work on a script for IFA and artificial intelligence systems. No, not sourdough, just regular homemade bread. I'm gonna try sourdough next. I'm afraid to try sourdough low key because I think it looks complicated. My kids love making cookies though, so I'm like, isn't that ironic? The Oracle finally making some cookies in her kitchen, but it's actually a fun activity to do with my children. And just to like make some groundedness for you guys, yes, even through all this knowledge, I teach a 3 and 5-year-old every day at home. I have two babies. How did you start your shamanic work? Through my psychedelic experiences, getting pulled out of my physical body and taken into the astral realm. It taught me that this life is laughable. And when I say laughable, I mean like the seriousness of it all. When you go to another state of consciousness, you see just how hell bent the world actually is, and you learn to become one with it. And because I grew up, I was a Broadway kid, like I loved musicals, I was in choir, band, all of that. I think frequency was just always a natural part of how I transmitted messages to people. I wanted to be a conductor when I was in high school. And I think it's like not by coincidence that I chose the road less taken and started banging sound drums and ringing sound bowls for a living. Sourdough is a fun experiment when you can do with your kids as well. I'm definitely gonna try that. They loved it. We were reading this book called The Bakery Dragon together. So like while I was making the bread, my son was reading the book too. Um, okay. I was seeing if anybody had any other questions. If not, this was such a fun live today, guys. If I hop on again, it'll be a more relaxed live, but we'll get back on tomorrow as well. Thank you guys so much for always being a great community. I will tell you, I'm on the verge of an account ban on TikTok right now on this page. I made a backup page, Taylor A. DeClue, but I'm so grateful. Like, I think about how many people would have quit if they got a page taken away or just didn't want to be online anymore. People have encouraged me to like post on YouTube, on Instagram. I'm I can't say anything, but I'm so grateful for it. I'm so grateful for being able to do what I do it with ease, do it with grace as often as I can, and then hopefully inspire the next group of people to start creating, to step into their own aura, to step into their field, and share with me when you guys are doing stuff so I can blast you on my page too. Like if you guys are putting out talks, please tag me in them because we got to boost each other up. Like as much as y'all have given me credit for the talks that I've given, when you put out something that you're really proud of, tag me in it so I can post it to my story so other people can see it. We deserve to be interconnected within this cycle. So thank you so much. The backup page is Taylor DeClue Backup. So the same way my name is spelled on here, but just add backup to it. It's the only account. I don't know of any other like ghost accounts or anything that follow me. I think I'm a hard act to follow anyway. I think even if somebody wanted to replicate my page, everybody would know. Well, all right, guys, you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much. Be sure to visit the website and book your decode today. Have a great day.
Tailored Healing TV by The Oracle, guiding people to the discovery of self.